Welcome to Let's Talk. I'm Jade Harrell, joined by Amber Klear, Amy Rivera, Teena Love, and special guest Jami Ballentine Dolby. Hello, ladies, and welcome back.
Hey,
We come together once a week to share our perspective on the news of the day, the issues of our world. And today we're going to be talking about a big issue in the background that's only getting worse during this pandemic. Domestic violence is something that a member of our group has lived through and experienced personally. We're going to get into her story in just a few minutes, but I'd like for us to start out with what are you listening to? Well, what are you talking about? We'll go with talking about this week in your circles. Jami, special guest, what are you talking about lately?
I think my circle is really talking about the community and really connecting. I think that we've all really enjoyed how, as distant as 2020 made us, we are really spending time connecting on a deeper level. And so we're connecting. And I think the favorite thing we're talking about is the new social app Clubhouse. So that's what my circle is talking about.
That sounds like fun. Social App Clubhouse. Amber Clear, what have you been up to? What are you guys talking about in your circles?
We are talking about Maria Kondo, and not just for our houses and our offices, but for our personal relationships with people. You have to, someone can ruin your past, but don't let them ruin your future by living rent free. So just Maria Kondo them the right out.
They got to get on with the getting on. Teena Love.
yes, I think the big topic is staying safe, really. To be honest, everybody's talking about, how to enjoy yourself with people, but at the same time, making sure that you take care of yourself and take care of somebody else by, of course, wearing a mask and social distancing and just keeping those things in mind. So that's really what's at the top of my mind and many conversations that I'm hearing today.
Right, right. So many big ones right now.
Oh, you're on mute. Can I hear you?
I said, how about you?
Oh, I'm like, wait. Like Tina, I am too, talking about being safe. Recently, my brother has been just diagnosed with COVID, and since then, 4 other people that are close to me have experienced it. So we are just taking a step back and saying, okay, this is really close to home. So how do we stay safe?
So for me, I'm talking about um, the absence of loved ones during the holidays and how we can somehow honor, tribute, connect, and stay close. So that's kind of been the main conversation is how can we keep that up? But in addition, how can we also make sure we're remaining connected to ourselves, touching in with where our state of mind and our emotions, our spirit, our health is. So that's what is in my constant conversation nowadays. It's an important thing to note, and domestic violence, the numbers are staggering. 1 in 2 of us, 1 in 3 of us, in many cases, have experienced some form of domestic abuse or violence. And if we're looking at our screen now, then you can certainly guess and expect that one or more of us have experienced domestic violence. Our dear friend, Teena Love, knows this story all too well. Domestic violence is also known as intimate partner violence, and it's always been a concern during the holidays. Things get wiggy then. This year is proving to be much, much worse. Lockdown orders and colder weather means victims will have to stay home and maybe even be trapped with their abusers. There's strains on our healthcare systems and essential services, shelters. Where will women go? UN Women is calling it the shadow pandemic. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, one of our own is a domestic violence survivor, Teena Love. Thank you for sharing your story with us. We'll spend the first half of our program focusing on your experience, and then we'll talk more in the second half about how we can be better advocates and help. So, thank you so much because you're probably speaking for many of us here. Um, but there are so many that don't survive. So let's just start with your story. How did you experience and as well as lived through domestic violence in your life?
Yes. Well, I just want to say that I just owe God all of my gratitude, and I know that if it had not been for him in 1994, the abuser that was in my life at the time was, well, basically told me that if he couldn't have me, nobody would or could. And I knew at that time that he was going to kill me. Um, I had just left college after being in Edwardsville for about 5 years, moved back to St. Louis, and uh, came to a new apartment. I was so excited and unpacking to live in my new apartment. And the abuser told me that he was going to come over and take me out, that we were going to celebrate. And I waited. And when he got there, I was all dressed and ready. And when I opened the door, he was visibly angry. I saw right away that there was something wrong. And he just began hitting me. When I say hitting me, he was about 6'2". And at that time, I was about 5 feet. And he was hitting me like Mike Tyson, like somebody, fighting a man. And I was trying to ask, what was going on? Why is he doing this? I'm trying to dodge hits. And all I could tell by the conversation and what he was saying was that if he couldn't have me, nobody could. Um, Apparently, he was told that I was, cheating on him, and he was angry. And he backed me up into a corner in the bathroom, and I fell over in the tub. And I can remember looking down and seeing a hammer. And I just knew I had a hammer because I was putting pictures up in the bathroom. And I just knew that he was going to get that hammer and he was just going to bash my head in. And I closed my eyes and I said, Lord, please, please help me. When I opened up my eyes, it was like a calm had came over him. And he said, let me take you to the hospital. Now, hindsight now, looking back, I thought to myself now, I'm thinking, my God, I would be crazy to get in the car with him and go anywhere. But at the time, I was so foggy. My eyes were pretty much shut. My forehead was like the Elephant Man. Lips were as big as they could ever get. And I was in a daze. And I did agree. I did agree to go to the hospital with him. And the interesting thing is when I walked out, there were neighbors and people watching, and I got in the car. We went to Barnes Hospital. And back in the 90s, Barnes Hospital emergency room was always popping. When I walked in and people saw me, they were talking, but everybody's mouth just dropped. And I can remember the nurses in triage immediately came and they got me and they pulled me to the back and they started to ask, did he do this to you? Did he do this to you? And all I could do was just cry. I think at the time he sensed that everybody was looking at him and he jumped in his car and he took off. And I didn't see him again until I was about 30, 35 years old. But um, that was something that I'll never forget.
I want to start with just my empathy. I am so sorry you had that experience. Um, I can't even imagine the confusion, the pain, the hurt that you had felt. Had you experienced anything like that with this person before?
Well, as a college student and meeting him, it doesn't start out physically abusive, right? When people are in relationships like this, they don't start out abusive. He was a very charismatic person in a fraternity. He was from the church. His both parents were married, and it's seemingly a person that you would want your daughter to date. Somebody who has to come from a two-parent home, religious background.
Mhm.
Personality, great. So it didn't start out abusive, but there were little things that mounted up. There was a lot of jealousy, possessiveness. The relationship started to become where he was very controlling. He basically would do things to let me know that he had the power and the control. Isolation would come into play where he really didn't want me around family and friends. And so it was just him. He wanted to always have my attention. And so those were the types of things that I went through. And it wasn't until that December in 1994, that afternoon, that physically I was violated. My parents had no idea because I did all that I could as a college student to make sure that they wouldn't find out. But of course, on that day, um, it all came out. Everybody, there was no hiding. Everybody knew that what I was going through.
Or they seemingly knew, because no one can imagine what you personally were going through in that moment and during that time. For you being in a fog then, some years later, you never saw him again or heard anything.
Fortunately, when I came out of the emergency room that day, my uncle came and picked me up. My parents weren't available when they called. I don't know what was going on, but when I finally did see my parents, they made sure that I would not see him again. They kept me. Really, I'll tell you, I didn't go back to the apartment that I just moved in. I don't know where my furniture and any of my belongings went at that point. Like, my parents handled everything, but they made sure that they kept me away from the person who had abused me. And I really credit that a lot to what happened, because um, oftentimes when an abuser does this to a victim, they will try to make promises after it happens, or they will try and apologize and get you gifts, or say they'll never do it again, and rationalize with you. But because my parents were so adamant that he would not get in contact with me, I thank God today for that, because uh, as a victim, when you go through something like this, self-esteem is so low that oftentimes when this person says something to you, as far as promises and different things, you fall back in that trap. But I thank God that my parents kept me away. They did not allow this person to get to me. And I really thank God for that today.
Grateful as well. What did your recovery entail? How were you able to heal and restore inside and to be the amazing woman that you were then and even more so now? What did it take?
Took a lot of therapy. There were group counseling sessions that I'd gone to with other women who experienced the same thing that I had experienced, ones that were survivors as well. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because oftentimes, if you, as a person who's gone through this, have not gone through a healing process, you haven't learned the things about you that perhaps, you know, contributed to some of this. Not saying that it was my fault at all, but oftentimes we have to identify what it is about ourselves that allowed us to put up with some of the things that we put up with. So that healing process is very important, because if a person doesn't heal and they don't identify those things, oftentimes they can get out of one relationship but end up meeting another person who is the exact same way. So that is why healing is so very important. And thanks, Jade, for that question.
Is there something that you could share about that self awareness that came? Because the key word that stood out as I was listening was falling into the trap. There are some things we just do naturally that we're inclined to. We're natural givers. We care. We put ourselves second. What are some of the things that you discovered, like you mentioned, about in your self awareness that maybe will help some of us?
Yes, absolutely. Another point to make is oftentimes when abusers abuse, there's oftentimes another issue that they're also struggling with. So it could be mental illness, it could be bipolar disorder, it could be maybe they're drugs and alcohol or whatever. And so, um, as a victim, oftentimes we as victims will decide to be, well, we don't decide, but we become codependent. So we don't want to leave this person because we feel like, well, we understand that they have some issues. So if we just help that person, and then things will get better. So we oftentimes take it upon ourselves to feel as we can fix them. So if I could think of anything, I would say that You have to be careful of that. And that's why it's very important to learn the things about yourself that can sometimes contribute to or, allow things to continue and escalate the way that they do. And so that would be codependency that I certainly had to learn about myself.
Yeah. What happened when you saw him? I want to save that question. I guess, where do you find strength now? What do you turn to remain strong and to put it behind you and step out here and be free of that bondage?
You know, it's God. It's God. Like I said, I have no doubt that when I closed my eyes that day in that bathtub that I'd fallen into, and I asked the Lord, please, Lord, help me, help me. When I opened my eyes and saw that there was a calm that came over him, I had no doubt he was with me. So that's where I drew my strength from, because I realized that he was with me then and he's with me today. I have much gratitude. He's brought me from a mighty long way. And so I give him all the praise and all the.
So powerful. Did you get justice in this case?
It's interesting.
For what he had done, or did he get the help for where he struggled? And did that even matter, or was a concern of yours at all?
It's interesting. My father, pastor. So my father, although that day was very, very angry. And to my understanding, much later on, I learned that my father actually went and looked for him, and it was not pretty the day that he did. But my father was a man of God. And although we wanted to press charges, we didn't. We knew that he came from a family of God as well. And we believed that vengeance is mine, says the Lord. And so we put it in God's hands. That's how we handled it. So, this person, he did apologize to me later on, much later on, and actually on my father's deathbed. He came to the hospital 2014 and he apologized and he said, I thank you because you could have hurt me, but you didn't. And my father forgave him. So that is where I find solace. I realize that, God deals with people the way he wants to deal with them. And I know that he dealt with them. He has been dealt with.
Oh, Teena, your dad probably was responding in his most natural dad way, and then turned to his faith as well, even further. And to hear that this person apologized speaks to what you said before, that there's some other issue. Hurt people, and they don't always know why. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, so we can all find out how we can support our friends and our neighbors who may be going through this, and how we can best advocate and maybe be a help to them on every side. So stay with us and let's talk some more.
No doubt you're going places, young lady.
Thank you. And thank you for the interview as well. I can imagine it was the last thing that you wanted to do after such a long campaign meeting.
You really are a very intelligent young woman. You're very smooth.
You're very smooth yourself.
You have no idea.
Hey, let's check out this park. Oh, wow, that's really cool.
To find a great local park or forest near you, go to discovertheforest.org.
Welcome back to Let's Talk. I'm Jade Harrell here with Amber Klear, Amy Rivera, Teena Love, and Jami Ballentine Dolby. Today we're talking about the very real and persistent problem of domestic violence, a problem that is getting worse because of the pandemic, during the pandemic. And Teena Love, our sweet sister, is a domestic violence survivor. She shared her story with us earlier in the show. Teena, I want to start with you say we as victims, and we also use the term survivor. Are they interchangeable? Would you make a distinction between the two? And what makes you feel most empowered?
So I say we as victims because if there's somebody out there listening right now, I want to be able to reach them. I want to be able to help them understand that I've been possibly where they are. But I do consider myself definitely a survivor of domestic violence and intimate partner abuse today. But I do know all too well what it feels like to be in the situation and be in the thick of things. And so I will often say, as a victim, because I want to make sure that if you're listening right now and you are experiencing this, I can relate to you. I know where you are. So that's why I say that. I go back and forth.
I respect and welcome that. Ladies, I know you're feeling as heavy as I am, but when I look at Teena, I feel so inspired and hopeful. And I feel like, this there's hope. I'll just put hope back out there. But through her strength, I feel stronger. And had now that she's got all of us and the support and help, I hope that empowers you even further. Amy?
I knew you were gonna call me. I'm over here crying. As I listen to Teena's story, I think of so many other people that I know who've went through this, including myself. I was recently diagnosed with PTSD recently because of a similar situation, but more of a family dynamic situation. And hearing her words, I feel like, wow, I feel like that's she's talking to me. And I'm also upset because I love her and I can imagine someone hurting our dear friend, that way. And then even the gentleman, I feel pain for too, because you saw at the end how the healing process took, and God always has a plan for us. And that's the message I got from this is, God is in control and he's using Teena as the soundboard for the rest of us to follow.
I thank you for mentioning post-traumatic stress disorder. I'll have you know that this happened in 1994, and so I probably suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder well into my late 30s. I would oftentimes wake up out of dreams, flashbacks of different things and different situations that I'd gone through. Just like someone with post-traumatic stress disorder, and I didn't realize it until just recently that was dealing with. Very, very good point, and thank you for mentioning that because that is exactly what I went through. Yeah.
And we can see here with our numbers, Amy has been able to share as well. I know Amber's feeling deeply for the people that she loves. Big heart Amber, sure has heard and experienced and knows. You okay to share now? Do you want me to come back around? All right, Jami.
Oh, thank you for sharing your story. I think it's so important that you share that. And I know that oftentimes Jade mentioned 1 in 3, and I know that all of us either know someone or have personally been affected by this. Can you talk about what was it like, at that age, and how different, you see a lot of movies and you think, married and with kids, or they live this life with this person. But I don't know, a lot of people understand that it happens to teenagers and young adults, both men and women. how was that experience, that something you experienced at such a young age and able to really have that family protection? What advice would you give a 20-something-year-old or a teenager to not necessarily look out for, but how do they get through this?
Hey, thank you so much for that question. Um, for many years, I used to go into classrooms and I would speak to high school students, middle school students, and young adult women and young adult men about this topic because you're right, one in every three teenagers will be in an abusive relationship before they reach the age of 18. So I would oftentimes go in and I would talk about the signs of an abusive relationship, an unhealthy relationship, because oftentimes our youth grow up in situations where they see these things going on in their family life. So they don't really realize that it is an unhealthy situation. It sometimes feels like the norm for many of them. I'll never forget when I would do these sessions and there'd be girls that would get very, very quiet and they would wait until everyone left the room and then they would secretly come to me and say, this is happening to me. So yes, this is happening. So it's not it's something that I would say to young people, if someone is hurting you, it's not love, and that you'll need to get away. But there's so much, but that would be the biggest message that I would get across to youth today.
Thank you.
Will you share some of those signs?
Well, yes, some of the signs being, someone being controlling, someone being jealous, and oftentimes as young girls, we think, oh, he just loves me so much, he don't want nobody else to be with me or me to be around anybody else, and so sometimes it can feel flattering at first, where you think, oh, he just loves me. But then it turns into possessiveness and controlling and monitoring your every move and threatening you and trying to pull you away and isolate you. So those are some of the signs I would say, Jade, is to understand that these things, they escalate just so subtly. They start out very innocently, but then it starts to get even worse. And so that's something that I would say as a young person, maybe in your 20s, as you had said, Jami, or as a high school student, that they should look out for.
There's something to consider as well. And there is no forced conversations for anyone watching or anyone here with us. And that if you're not ready and if still and quiet is what you need, that is certainly okay too. We want to be sure that you know that there is help available. There are uh, crisis lines, there are support systems, there are places and people, if you may not know right off because you may feel foggy or confused or isolated even. If you're able to, at the sound of our voices or tuning in somehow, I'm like a click away. There is help, and please let anyone know. If you have to wait till the room clears or when no one's watching, but this is not okay, and it is not what you have to endure. And we had this program so that you know that is not your lot.
One thing I also want to say is, oftentimes family and friends, they can pick up the signs. They know when things are going on. Um, children that grow up in this situation, sometimes they become so upset with like they just don't understand why mom won't just leave, or friends, you see this happening with another friend and you're like, why does she stay? Why won't she just leave? Why won't he just leave? And there are a lot of different reasons. But what I would say to any individual that knows that this is happening to somebody else, don't give up on that person. I know it gets frustrating when you hear that maybe the police have been called and then the police come over and then the person says, oh, but that's okay. I don't want to file charges. It's okay. And you get frustrated with this individual because you're like, what? 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 Really? But what I want to say is don't give up on them. Hang in there because at the any moment, this person could finally see that they need to get away. And this is why we encourage people to have a plan. Have a bag packed somewhere with a few of your kids' clothing and your clothing so that if you have in the middle of the night, 2 or 3 in the morning, you can grab a bag somewhere and keep it moving and never turn back. So that's what I would say to family and friends and to anybody who is experiencing something like this, male or female, because it does happen to men as well as women. And it's very embarrassing for men. They don't oftentimes want to share it. They don't want to let anybody know, but there are men that are being abused by their partner.
I think it's important to note for all the moms that are out there that are staying with their abuser for the sake of their children because he's a good father or he's a provider. I think that the most important thing to remember is the love example that you accept as a parent. If you accept that type of love, that is what your daughters grow up thinking that a normal relationship is. That is how your sons grow up thinking that a normal relationship is. So you have to get out for your kids, no matter how good of a provider or how good of a father figure that person might be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't tell you the amount of times I've heard women say, well, I just want my children to be with their father. But Amber's right. If a child is seeing this, it's shaping them. It's going to have an impact on them as they move forward into relationships. I'm doing my show right now, The Lover's Lounge, and I'm talking to experts that talk about childhood experiences have everything to do with how a relationship is today with that person. You're shaping and molding them right then as a child. So you're right, Amber. That's such a great point. Thank you.
I want to thank you for Tina for sharing not only your story but the very real help that we as loved ones can give and be for our friends and family that are experiencing this. This is a very real and dangerous situation. If your safety is a concern, please be very careful. But absolutely, if you're concerned for your safety, that's a very key sign that help is needed. So please seek help. Know that you are not alone, and we will continue to bring conversations about this, but how you can be empowered to not be in this anymore. I want to thank you all for being with us. Amber, Klear, your input invaluable, and I know this was hard to endure. Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Jami, as well. As we wrap up, we're going to provide a list of domestic violence resources. We will put them on the screen as well as posts below. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Let's Talk. And Tina, of course, amazing Teena Love, for sharing your story and lifting us once again. We're here every Tuesday and we want to hear from you. Connect and let us know what you're talking about, and make sure you follow STL TV on social media. Until next week, we'll see you.